So with on Uncaged, I really like the groups of like the Uncaged VIP calls, which we do roundtables, and it's cool like get to know the guys off that. But what was really cool is we actually were able to go to the couples retreat and really get to meet people in person and make like real connections. And those are like the ones that are like deep, where even after the retreat, people are like still supportive of like social media messages and just all of like huge support from everyone in the group. So that's been super awesome.
That's awesome. Well, man, before we like hop too into the weeds with the conversation we're gonna have here today, why don't you go ahead and tell the guys who you are, what you do, and we'll get into this, man.
My name is Brent Schlangen. They kind of call me the everything guy because I have multiple businesses, party bus, trucking company, nutrition, health. I'm also buy and sell real estate, so a little bit of variety there. And we also have 4 kids, so we stay plenty busy.
Yeah, bro, that's definitely a busy man. That's awesome. Well, yeah, man. So like you were talking a little bit in the beginning part of this about like just like those in-person relationships and being able to deepen whatever relationship maybe you had prior or creating all brand new relationships in and of itself like in the in-person retreats and it was awesome. It was great having you both at the co-ed retreat. It was just really cool to get to know both of y'all. And this was actually right before y'all got married, so it was like a lot of hype around that, which was like super cool. And now to see you guys have been married and like let's just talk a little bit about like what that journey's been like. What's it been like, building relationships both inside your marriage and outside of your marriage, like inside like the uncaged ecosystem, if you will.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to be a part of some like the relationship calls with Uncaged. So it was like super helpful, like just building our relationship, like going into our marriage, which has been helpful to like keep the communication rolling even in our marriage. Like we've been married for 2 months, and it feels like things, they're the same when you're married. It just feels like things shift a little bit because like the expectations become a little bit different. Of like, okay, now we're like actually locked in for life, building this life together. So it's just cool, like kind of navigate through those conversations. Like, okay, what's the next step? Like, what are we building towards, and how are we doing it together instead of just two people individually doing it? Now we're actually supporting those goals to support our family. So it's been cool having that support system around Uncaged that's allowed to kind of help navigate even deeper into those conversations.
That's cool. And that's the reason we do the co-ed retreats, man, is just because when you go down this like journey of like personal and professional development, like it's super easy to leave like another person behind, like whichever person happens to be the one that starts down like the personal development first, whether it be resentment or, whatever the case is, we see that a lot. And so like this is like our preventative from and keeping that from happening is like, you know, bringing our spouses along the journey with us, especially for someone like yourself who has so much going on and I feel like you're constantly juggling like different responsibilities, different hats, different businesses, different, whatever the case is, roles and responsibilities is I could definitely see where one might feel like they aren't as important in your life because there's other quote unquote priorities, not saying it prioritizes over your wife or your kids, but like those are irregardless priorities. And sometimes if we do not prioritize those correctly, it can lead down a pretty gnarly road of that needs to be recovered with your spouse. But like, you know, it was cool to see you guys, like I said, right before your wedding, being at a co-ed retreat and being vulnerable, not only being vulnerable and taking advice, but like also being able to give value and advice as well. What's it like, as you are kind of navigating relatively new waters, like you said, not much changes, but a lot changes. And knowing like that there's other couples around you that you can lean on that like are focused on like that same like personal and professional development like yourself. What's that experience been like for you personally, and like how are you like capitalizing on it?
Yeah, it's good. Um, so I think it's fun to just kind of compare to like the different couples. Like, okay, we're all going through like similar situations. Like, no one's different in that realm. Like, you always have like the imbalances of relationship. I think one thing I like learned from one of the past relationship calls was like, um, basically don't like bombard your spouse or your partner. Like, don't trap them in with a serious conversation without them being like a little bit prepared. Because like sometimes it's easy to like have a long road trip somewhere, and also you want to have like this difficult conversation. Like that's not really fair to your partner because now they have nowhere to go. So it's kind of like getting those conversations like set aside, so that way you can have like a people know what you're getting yourself into, so they're not high emotion in that conversation. Because otherwise, you're stuck in a car for an hour somewhere. It can get pretty heated because guess what? Now, what are you gonna do? Jump out the car while it's moving because you don't like the conversation? It just doesn't work that well.
No doubt. And that's actually, because I know you've been a part of some of the relationship calls, and pillar coaching and stuff like that. It's one of the big topics that comes up pretty regularly, in my opinion, is that like how do you fight or how do you have some of the hard conversations or like what's the best way to like keep emotions not heightened, you know, as especially when it is a tough conversation, a lot of people like to be prepared. It's hard to have so in anything in life, I see people they act out a character when they get desperate. Now, desperate can be translated many different ways based on the scenario, right? Like, for example, like, most of us aren't murderers, but if it comes between our life and our family's life, like, you know, some of us have to make that hard decision. We will step into that role if need be. And yeah, duh, it's self-defense, blah, blah, blah. Let's not get caught up in terminology there. But like that is something that would make someone act out of character if desperate. Same thing, like you see financially, you see people get hard up for cash and then they start pulling away on different things. And a lot of times, like if you have those conversations, there's some like really absorbent like excuse that they come up with, and it's not true, and that's not who they are. Like they are acting out of character because they're desperate here, right? And so to bring it back to the relationships and the conversation piece is like when we bombard our significant other with a conversation that we've had all day or several days or a week or a month or whatever to prepare for it. And we've got our facts, we have our ducks in a row, like we got our notes, like we're mentally in that headspace to have that conversation and they have no idea it's coming. There will become some sort of desperation for them because like they're scrambling, they're trying to catch their tail, like they don't know what's going on. And that's when you'll see some people go into like some sort of a defense mode, or they'll use some of their own defense mechanisms, and albeit a majority of ours aren't healthy defense mechanisms, and that's where you see people lashing out or saying things they don't mean or trying to intentionally throw someone off the game. And that can be a very dangerous situation. And so like I agree with you, like that whole like preparation for like the right and the wrong ways of having some of these difficult conversations, I think is extremely important. But like again, going back to what I was saying earlier, is it's really cool now for me personally, like when I get in some of those situations where there might need to be a hard conversation to be had, like I have the ability to lean on some of the other people that I know that either have been through it, are going through it, or will go through it, and kind of, bouncing some ideas off them and getting some sort of a lifetime feedback. I think it's huge. And like, like I said, you come into the retreat right before getting married, I think definitely sets like a really solid foundation for, your relationship and learning. Not necessarily you're not going to have all the answers after one retreat, by no means. None of us do. But like at least knowing that there's resources out there for you to tap into and just get lifetime advice from. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really like even like during the retreat, we had some question answers and like everyone like contributed one way or another, and it was like everyone was like so open to be helpful. and to give like their personal advice. And like during retreat, there's a lot of like vulnerability towards that, and you don't get that sometimes in the day to day. So it's like cool, like have people like show how much willingness they are to like listen, or like even if it was not a retreat, like if I would want to message anyone in an Uncaged group, they would pick up the phone call and say, "Hey, I got you, dude. I can." Would talk them through it, it just knowing that it's kind of like more like a family setting, like, hey, we're in it for each other. Like we no one's better than each other, so it's like we're all here to help each other. So this was super cool being part of that group for that. And yeah, like the couples retreat was amazing. And one of the things that we didn't mention too, like we got to go to the couples retreat because we won it for free. So when we went there, we want to give it back a lot of value too, because we were able to be there. And everyone else had, pay to be there. So we want to honor their time, give back as much value as we could for being given the opportunity to be there. So it was cool to be super involved at the retreat. Still got little goosebumps from being there, and it was fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you mentioned the vulnerability aspect of it too, right? And obviously we've talked about relationships a lot on this call and then like going to even the relationship with other people, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be uncaged members, but like that's just happens to be the ecosystem that we're in. And so that kind of is natural to talk about. But like with that said, when it comes to like these relationships with other people and really a relationship with yourself, like learning yourself and learning how to improve yourself, the vulnerability aspect is key that like I'm really kind of clinging on to when it comes to Uncaged because that's been one of the defining factors that I think a lot of members get to experience is, it's really hard to be the first person to be vulnerable. It's also really hard for you to be vulnerable your first time. But every time it happens after that, it gets easier and easier and easier. And it creates this environment where you can be open and honest and transparent and the real work is on the other side of that, right? Like, we joke about it all the time that like none of us are mind readers. Like unless you admit to going through something or needing help with something or being stuck with something, like none of us like truly know. And arguably not only do we not know, but we are so busy focused on ourselves like we don't have time to babysit, right? And so it's not that we won't dedicate time to someone in need when asked, but we're not going to go just search the lives of hundreds of other members and go through their life with a fine-tooth comb and take a magnifying glass to figure out where they need help. Like, motherfucker, you're a grown adult. If you need some help, voice the opinion. Otherwise there's nothing we can do, right? And so that's been really fun. And to your point, you see that a lot more at the retreats because it's more of an intimate setting. You got cortisol, right? Like people are excited, really dope house. You got private chefs, all your homies, getting to break bread with each other and great sidebar conversations. And it produces that atmosphere where that is acceptable. And like I said, it's normally like a domino effect. You'll see one person be the brave one that gets vulnerable, and then boom, 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 the rest comes. And I think that's been um one of my favorite parts about like watching from the outside in is seeing people open up, whether it be for the first time or what. But like, what are some things that you've experienced along the way of like what being vulnerable yourself can do for you, your relationship, your family, like your businesses? Like, have you had any experiences with that yet?
Um, one thing I thought of right away is when you're talking like what gets mentioned a lot in Uncaged is open mouths get fed. So like bringing that to attention, like, hey, if you want to learn something or grow, gotta make sure you like open your mouth and ask for that advice. Um, so trying to get better at communicating with like people around me, like whether it's workers or a wife, like building that communication and like asking those questions. I think it's key to like make sure like you ask those questions. Otherwise, like you said, you won't know. It's a guessing game of okay, what's going on in their life. And sometimes you get little cues if you see like some like just a little attitude, like if we're not I think it's a kind of a big clue if someone's not like talking to you. and they're being quiet. Okay, like what's the reason why? There must be something going on. And instead of being defensive, like we were talking about earlier too, is like maybe find like what you can do to support it instead of putting the blame like on you or like because I think that becomes an ego thing. So it's kind of like okay, opening up on that. But on the other end too is like making sure we do the same thing in our shoes. Like we're not just um giving the silent treatment, like making sure like open up and like, hey, this is why this was bothering me today, or like what's like why that motion or what you did was like just threw off my like balloon. And so I say balloon because like sometimes it's like you got so many balloons in a day. So you can if someone pops 10 balloons, that's all you had for a day. They don't have the energy to have for anyone else. Your balloons are all popped. So it's kind of like how can you kind of prevent some of those balloons from being popped? And that comes through that communication of, talking through with the relationships. And a lot of what I like to do too is like network with other people. So other businesses, other people around, just kind of building those communication. And it's kind of like this who you know, right? So it's like who you network with. That's what's going to set you further ahead in life.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think yeah, it was you and Ashley talking about the balloons. And I thought that was a genius analogy. Of course, like in my competitive nature and just like the lifestyle my wife and I live, like we play Mario Kart and stuff like that, you know. And so I just got like this vision of like, driving around in the car with the balloons above you and like when some shit pops off during the day or whatever, it's like another blow, and then boom, there goes a balloon, and then another, and then another, and it's just like, sometimes you do end up defeated, whether it be at the end of the day, halfway through the day, and the beginning stages of the day, and you know, it'd be an interesting conversation to have, right? Like of a what's ways to protect yourself from getting your balloons popped? B, is there a way for you to get new balloons, right? Like to kind of re-energize yourself in certain areas. But also too, like, from a competitive mindset and in the nature of having a conversation based on relationships, thinking about life as being a team effort, right? As if I see Heather's balloons have already been popped for the day or she's down to her last one, like how can I step in and keep those last couple of balloons alive or vice versa or whatever the case is. So, like I said, like it was really cool that I had a huge takeaway from the retreat, when y'all were talking about the balloon analogy. And I was like, you know what? I like that. But yeah, man. I mean, like, so what are some things that like you've seen works well in your life? Like I said, like I don't know the rules to it. We're joking about it being an analogy, but it is like a real thing. Like, like are you seeing ways like how you either protect your own balloons, protect your family's balloons? Are you regenerating balloons? Like, what's that going on with you in your life, like actively today, or like what's something that you're focused on in that area?
Yeah. I think of like who pops the balloons the most often? Probably the kids, right? So they always do something crazy. So it's like if knowing that, to like say my wife Ashley, she only has like three balloons left. You just know like she had a long day. The kids are getting on her nerves, and I have maybe five balloons. And you're not really keeping count on who has what balloons, but you can kind of see from the energy of the other person, like, hey, this person's having a hard time because they got all this chaos going on around the house. Like when I think of like picture the house, like okay, my wife's cooking. There's a mess all around the house. The kids are all, we have four kids. They're all going after her. She's trying to cook. So what I could do as the husband is, okay, I can distract the kids and bring them to the other room or try to keep them occupied. And so that'll save her probably two balloons right there. And that's just a simple 10 minutes, me like taking the kids while she's doing that. So kind of being mindful of like how can you help in that situation to kind of conserve those balloons and it's kind of like returning the favor in some ways. Okay, no, the opposite's having a hard time. How can I give like one of my balloons? Or how can we keep the chaos to a minimum. And I think some of that comes with like structure too. So we try to have some structure in the house of like the kids know what they're supposed to do to help out around the house. We have like little task lists for them to do. And I think it's super helpful. So it's not us just telling them what to do. Sometimes like, okay, did you check off your boxes for the day? And that kind of helps save some of the balloons too, just by having a little bit of system structure for that.
I like it. Yeah, and I know this might get to be sensitive subjects for some people, but some people, those are probably the people that need to hear it the most. We actually had some pretty interesting conversations with some other members, kind of involving this. Like they were just like letting the kids run the household and like really run the mom down. And we see this even in Lottie's life. Like, Lottie is very testy, with Heather, right? So it's like the kids being very testy with the mother. And but like they don't do that with the dads, right? And I'm not saying it's a man thing or a woman thing, whatever, but I just know we've talked about this pretty openly, and it's always been the same kind of demographic. Like the mom can say one thing and it's in one ear out the other. The dad says it, and it's like, sir, yes, sir. And it creates this combative nature inside the household and even some resentment. But anyways, a lot of people will often forget, in my opinion, that like the kids are the kids, right? Like we are here to parent the kids and the kids do what we tell them to, right? And so a lot of times I get upset um, with people, with parents who allow the kids to run them. And it's not like I'm not pissed off at them or whatever. It hurts because I know like what that's like. And, we've been through that and like how detrimental that can get between like driving a wedge between husband and wife and how important it is to solve that, and I agree, like the structure needs to be there. Not only does that help protect this environment from getting toxic, like what we're talking about, but also it's a huge life lesson opportunity for the kids. Like people need structure, bro. Like I know adults who don't have structure because they never had structure as kids. Like they were never taught that. And what little structure they were given in school or whatever the case is, like they were uninterested in it and just led into this like really wild and chaotic lifestyle. And unfortunately, some of us are passing that down to our kids. And so, no, I think that it's huge. I think that, like I said, parents need to parent and kids need structure. And I think you're spot on for that. Like like with four kids, man, like that's, a 6-person household's very chaotic and you've got a lot going on with like your businesses. So like what are some of the things that you've done to try and manage all of that as much as possible?
And I think knowing that's never going to be perfect. So like just because you have a system and some things don't go quite as planned, like so what? Like you kind of make up for it as you go. So like we try to have that system in place. That way it's easier to manage, like especially with kids and stuff. But like for kids, they're not always gonna listen. They're gonna and the thing is like it's okay sometimes too. Like let kids be kids. They're only young for so long, so like let them have that. Um, for me and like our family, it's sometimes challenging to balance like everything from working together. We run businesses together, me and my wife, kids. So it's kind of hard sometimes where we run into issues is like, okay, what this kind of go back to like what time do we have topics towards business? What times do we have like topics towards relationship? And sometimes they're intertwined. So it's not always perfect. But I think it's kind of good to have some boundaries a little bit. And like going back to, like I said, okay, now the mom's overstimulated. She's got all the kids. They feel safe around her, but she's overstimulated because she has all this going on. She's taking care of the house. She's doing all these things. So like setting the boundaries, like sometimes I'll like send my wife outside of the house. It's like, hey, just go have your one-on-one time with yourself. Like go drive around, go do what you want. Just having her leave the house, like give your guys yourself this space to do that. Like you're not trapped in your house. You can leave whenever you want. And just having like maybe that 30 minutes away, now the kids are they do behave better around me. So it's like they just are not as needed because there's I don't know, it's their mom. So like they just want to bug mom just because it's mom. They will say mom, 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 mom for no reason, right? So just giving that space kind of calms the house down and kind of brings things back to normal. So I think that just helps create those boundaries.
I love it, bro. No, that's super badass. And that's definitely important to be able to understand or to like visualize inside the household, right? Like that's one of the things that like I think a lot of people miss is they're not paying attention to some of the needs of the other. And that's where I think a lot of resentment can come into place is because like it's like, motherfucker, do you not even see what I deal with on a day-to-day basis? However, that is a hard conversation to navigate because we all have our own levels of difficulty throughout the day, right? And so sometimes for a lot of us, it is hard to pull our head out of the trenches and recognize anything else that's going on with anyone else. And so being able to have the clarity in your day to day to even observe some of this stuff, not only observe it, but then to be able to come up with some sort of a solution to the problem, I think is absolutely paramount when it comes to keeping your head on straight, specifically yourself, um, but then also like protecting the household for like whatever that household unit looks like. And I think that's key when we are even having a conversation about relationships is just understanding that like there is you yourself, like you have to be able to take care of that person. Then there is, the spouse or the significant other or whatever the case is, and then there is the children, which makes up the rest of the household. I think that's super important. Like, is there anything that you've learned along the way over the last couple of years or whatever the case is, like as you've been newer into entrepreneurship as well as like parenthood as well as marriage and things of that nature?
Um, I think of like what in the same realm of like relationship is like the five love languages. Like if you haven't read the book, read that book. And kind of like talks about too like the balloon analogy, like how can we fill up that balloon for your spouse or like what are the things that fill your cup? And it's kind of funny because me and my wife, we have like the opposite love languages of what's like natural to us.
Mhm.
So it's kind of hard to like learn to love your spouse when it's not natural to you. And making sure it's super important that you kind of do that because that's what makes them feel loved. So it might not be natural to you, but still like learning how to do that. So it's kind of like learning a new language, like might take some practice, but it's kind of like in the same way as like if you don't do that, or if sometimes you don't know what their love language is, now they're not speaking the same language as you. So it's kind of important that they know what your love language is. So me and my wife, we've done a lot of like learning what each other's love languages are, even though they're not like natural to us. We've working towards making sure each other feel loved. And like I said, we're not perfect at it. It takes a struggle every day. It's kind of like practice that, but just know like, hey, we're working towards that, and we're just making it, um, just going that route of like just getting better every day and trying to fill each other's cups so that way so we have like an extra balloon.
That's awesome. No, I get it 100%, dude. And it is. It all starts over every day. You got to rework towards this goal every day of just getting better and becoming better and, being that best version of yourself. It's wild. And, it can get overwhelming, right? Especially like when there are other quote unquote dependents, in your life is like you see how detrimental it is to, you know, become the best version of yourself. And that is obviously a lifelong journey. And so like to think of a lifelong journey, it's very overwhelming. And then it's like, well, then what's the 10-year goal? And like that even seems overwhelming because like 10 years is a long time. And then it's, well, then how do I break that down into 5-year goals? And then the 5 years, how do I turn those down into 1-year goals? And then 1 year into quarter and quarter into month and month into week and week into day. And like then you start to really conceptualize the fact that like the whole eat an elephant in one bite you can't do, but when you start focusing on those small wins daily, those critical tasks every day, you get through your critical tasks and then you won the day. And then you get through, enough 1 days and you've won the week, and you get through enough 1 weeks and you win the month and the quarter and then a year and then 5 years and then 10 years. And like, at some point along the way, you can look up and realize that shit, man, I've been doing this for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, a year, whatever the case is. And you can see that progression on where you were versus where you are. And then, like, for me, like, that gives me hope into the future of like, all right, we got this. This then becomes something that I don't want to say it will be tangible. Like it is tangible. Like it is something that you can like actively see. Like I can look back to yesterday and say, did we win yesterday or did we lose yesterday? And what did we learn if we did lose? And how do we win more days than we lose moving forward? And then how do we win more weeks, than we lost previously moving forward? And to your point, like you said, like you wake up every day and it's a new struggle. It's a new opportunity to improve and to grow and to win. Honestly, like it should be exciting to know that like today is a new opportunity to win versus yesterday. Um, any experience like with yourself personally on like what that mindset has done for you or like what you've learned along the way being in that like whole mindset that like, hey, today has its new struggles. We face them as they come, like not getting too overwhelmed with like outside or like exterior forces, like anything along those lines.
Yeah. So I think sometimes people, and me included, is we have challenges of like looking in the past and seeing like how far we come. I'm actually in our nutrition club right now in the back. And we've been here for 6 years. We serve like protein shakes, energy teas. We have a good clientele coming in here. And like every year we try to kind of update the space a little bit. So it's kind of like looking back at those pictures, like, okay, we started with like ugly carpet on the floor, and now it's like nice flooring. We've 2 years ago we like expanded our space. And now going on right now, I can hear in the background they're actually doing some cutting and sawing in the back because we're actually expanding again in our space. Or like we're making our space even bigger. So it's like we're always trying to make a better space for our people, but it's like we're always making these improvements. And that's what's fun is like looking back at that and like, okay, we started here and now we made this improvement, made like painted this wall, made this look better. And like always like now we're able to see that in like over the 6 years, like how far we've grown just by doing that. Just small improvements, like you said, small wins. Like those are like all small wins, but like they add up over time. And that was just 6 years, so that's fun to see.
That's awesome, man. No, I'm here for it. I can't remember if I talked about it on the last episode or not, but I talk about it frequently, like, just practicing visualizations and like spending 5 minutes thinking about where you were to where you've come, like in the middle of that timeline, and then 5 minutes focused on like where you are now to where you're gonna go has been really monumental. And I agree with being able to look back with like a solid head on your shoulders and be like, you know what, like we have made this amount of progress. And like for that, I can hold my head high. Now, I love it, bro. Well, man, it's been really great having this conversation with you and chopping it up and just getting to know more about your journey and learning from you and the value that you can bring to the table and, the mindset that you have. With that said, like, what's something that we can do to pay you back for the time that you spent here with us today, man?
Honestly, it's just fun to be here. If you guys ever want to check out my page, you can just look up Brent Schlangen. I stay pretty open about my journey on there, and but it's also fun just being part of the Uncaged. So you guys can always reach out. I'm always here.
That's awesome. I love it, bro. Well, if you ever need anything from us, please reach out. And for those of you listening, if you got something from it, reach out to myself, Brent. Let us know what you got out of it. Share it with someone that needs to hear it. And other than that, man, if you want to get in contact with him, reach out to him directly. If you can't find him directly, reach out to me. We'd be more than happy to point you in the right direction. And otherwise, we'll see you on the next one. Peace.